Time is one of those resources we are all given equally, yet how we use it shapes everything. Welcome to Speaking from the Heart, folks. I'm Richard Fontenay, your host for today. And do you realize that at its core, leadership is the integration of how we think, act, and live across business, work, and our lives? And from a scriptural and values-driven perspective, spiritual leadership is the practice of leading from within, guided by faith, values, and a higher purpose. And here is the secret. We are all called to lead in some way, whether or not we have a formal leadership position. Today, our conversation will turn to the stewardship of time and talents and what it means to practice productivity in our everyday lives from a faith-based perspective. Now, if you find value in these conversations, I invite you to subscribe, like, and share it with someone who may need some encouragement today. And thank you for doing so. You know, there is something deeply personal about time. We often say we do not have enough of it. We feel rushed, stretched, and sometimes overwhelmed. But Scripture invites us to see time differently. The God that is within us speaks to us through the noise. We can hear her Spirit talking to us on our walks, or as we take in a beautiful sunrise, or as we smell the flowers. Sometimes it's in the silence as we sit on the balcony, on a bench in the park, or as we stroll in the evening. And sometimes it's that beautiful noise of the street, as Neil Diamond sang. But in the end, we know it's that quiet spiritual nudge that comes out of the proverbial blue, which pushes us in the right direction. In Psalm 90, we read, "Teach us to number the days that we may gain a heart of wisdom." Now, this is not about counting time in fear and trepidation. It's about living with the time that we have with purpose and intention. Time, from a biblical perspective, is not just a schedule to manage. It is a gift to steward. In the Gospel of Matthew, we find the parable of the talents. A master entrusts resources to his servants, and each is given according to their ability. Two invest what they have given and multiply it. And one hides his talent out of fear. That message is clear. We are not called to simply preserve what we have been given. We are called to use it wisely, and that includes our time. Spiritual productivity begins with this shift in mindset. Time is not something to control. It's something to honor. When we begin to see time as stewardship, our decisions begin to change. We become more thoughtful about where we invest our energy. We become more aware of distractions. We become to discern and ask better questions. Am I using my time in the right way that reflects my values? Am I investing in what truly matters? Am I aligning my daily actions with a greater sense of purpose? Now, these are not easy questions, but they are necessary. In Ephesians chapter 5, we are reminded, "Be very careful how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity. Notice the language. Be careful. Be wise and make the most of every opportunity. This is intentional living. This is spiritual leadership in action. And what do I mean by spiritual leadership? Well, I mean living in faith, love, forgiveness, compassion, and justice. And with today's theme, it is using our time wisely so that we can faithfully lead in our families, communities, and dare I say, throughout the world. Now let us bring this into everyday lives. In business, stewardship of time means focusing on meaningful work rather than constant activity. It means setting priorities that reflect long-term impact and not just short-term urgency. It means making contributions with time and talent to our communities and throughout charitable organizations. In the workplace, it means respecting not only your time, but the time of others. And that really means that teams become more purposeful, communication becomes more intentional, and work becomes more aligned. In life, it means creating space for what truly matters, for our family, for our faith, for rest, for reflection. Without purpose, productivity leads to exhaustion. And that's why God God commanded it, to take a day for rest and reflection. It's one day of the week to align our purpose with God's unfolding loving ways. There is also an important truth we must acknowledge. We are not meant to do everything. Even Jesus modeled this. Throughout the Gospels, we see moments where he stepped away. He withdrew to pray. He rested. He focused on what matters most in each moment. Now, if we are honest, many of us struggle with this. We feel pressure to keep going, to do more, and to achieve more. But living in the Spirit is not about constant motion. It's about living in faithful communion with the Spirit. And in the end, it's about doing the right things at the right time for the right reasons. Let me share a simple example. Imagine people starting their day without a sense of purpose. They check their emails, they respond to messages, they move from one task to another, and by the end of the day, they are exhausted. But they are also unsure of what they really accomplished that day. Now imagine those same people beginning their day in quiet reflection. Take a few moments in prayerful thanksgiving. They consider their priorities for the day, and they choose one or two meaningful tasks to focus on. The day may still be full, but it is now purposeful. This is the difference stewardship makes. It shifts from reacting to leading. Another important aspect of being productive spiritually is recognizing seasons. There are times for building, times for resting, times for learning, and times for leading. Ecclesiastes reminds us that there is a time for everything. When we ignore this, we create unnecessary pressure. When we honor it, though, we find peace. And this does not mean we avoid responsibility. It means we approach it with wisdom. So how do we begin to live this out? Yeah, we start with awareness. Pay attention to how we spend our time. Notice where our energy goes. Then we can move to alignment. We can ask ourselves if your time or if our time reflects your core values, and if not, what needs to change. Next, take small intentional steps and block time for really what matters. Create space for reflection, including spiritual reflection, and protect moments for rest. And finally, trust the process. Growth takes time. Change takes consistency. You do not need to transform everything overnight. You simply need to begin. Let me leave you with a few reflection questions. Where are you currently spending your time? What activities are bringing the most value to your life and work? What is the one small change you can make this week to better steward your time? Take a moment to sit with these questions. Write them down if you can, and pray over them if that is part of your practice. Because transformation often begins with self-reflection, and reflection leads to purposeful action. Now, as we close, remember this. Your time is a gift. Your talents are a gift. And how you use them matters, not just for productivity, but for purposeful living. If this conversation resonated with you, please subscribe, like, and refer it to a friend. And thank you for doing so. I'm Richard Fontenay, signing off. See you next week as we begin to explore another spiritual moment, focusing on how humility and servant leadership go together. Talk with you soon. Bye now.